recently Fujifilm decided to loan me out this lens, and I think it's relatively new. I think it came out at the start of this year, but I'm not too sure. But I had fun using this lens. It was super dope. It's super tiny and portable. But let's get into a bit more slight detail. I don't want to do a whole scientific review. I want to keep this one nice and short. But let's start off by talking about this lens's build quality. Now, as you can see from this B-roll overlaying here, the lens is pretty petite. It's pretty small. I'm pretty sure it's got 10 elements in 8 groups when it comes to the lenses, if that means anything to you. For me, I don't really ever go that technical, but yeah, that's that. Obviously it goes down to a low f2.8, as you can see down the aperture ring, and it has an aperture ring on the lens, which is pretty dope. It has a smaller focus wheel as well, which I'll talk about later on. And yeah, it's a pretty petite, small lens. I think the lens weighs in around 155 grams or so, or something like that. So it's a really light lens. It's got a filter size of 49 as well on the front. And it's a solid metal-based construction and that beautiful black finish, which is pretty dope. Now the lens is also weather resistant. Fuji have like this lineup of small miniature lenses. There's quite a few. I think I tested one last year. I think it was either the 35mm, could be mistaken, I think it was the 23mm, but they're all like these little midget lenses, and they're perfect for like running around and stuff like that. And this is kind of the new one into that group. I think all the other lenses are f2, and this is the only one that's an f2.8, so it's a little bit slower. It's letting a little less of light inside of the lens, but I don't think it's anything too dramatic. And when it comes to 16mm, I know you guys are looking for bokeh, and 16mm kind of negates any bokeh anyway, so yeah, don't worry about the 2.8. The lens is super dope. Now, like all other Fujifilm lenses, this lens is sharp. Now, I'm not one of these scientific guys who are going to take a picture of a brick wall and zoom into the corners and stuff like that. All you need to know is when it's wide open, it's sharp in the center, and it's a little bit softer on the outskirts of the lens. And when you stop down to 5.6 above, it's just sharp all the way through, from what I noticed. But I'm going to show you some shots that I got anyway, and some scenarios that I did. I didn't have much time to use the lens because my schedule was so busy, and then I just decided throughout the middle of the week to trade in one of my cameras in exchange for another one. So I didn't have a Fujifilm body at the time until literally 2 days before I had to send the lens back. So I didn't get much time to actually physically go on an epic shoot with the lens, but I just stayed local and did a little walk around and did my own little tests, and they came out all right. So as usual, when I make a video like this, a lot of you guys always ask how it is for video in the comments. Now, I find that difficult to answer because when I shoot video, a lot of the time I'm shooting manual, but say today, for instance, when I'm filming things like this, it's in autofocus or continuous focus. So I suppose it does make sense. A lot of you guys want to use the autofocus. So let's talk about that side of this lens. Now for me, video wise, this lens is a little 50-50 in the sense that it has its pros and it has its cons. I'm going to start with the pros first and tell you the things that I really loved about this lens. Now the first thing that you'll notice when you start to use this lens is the autofocus mechanism inside is pretty silent, especially when you go into video mode. You just don't hear it doing its focus. Sometimes you get a little bit of jittering on some lenses, but on this lens it was silky smooth, hardly any sound whatsoever. When you are shooting photos though, you can hear the motor moving a little bit, but very minute compared to other lenses that I own. But yeah, for video, it's very silent. As far as the autofocus goes on this lens, it locks on pretty nice, and it's very smooth in its transitions as well. I set up a little scene here where you can see me walking towards the camera, and you can see how close I get to the camera. It holds my focus, and when I walk away, it grabs my focus as well. The thing is, when it's a 16mm lens, I mean, it does so much for the lens to be able to see anyway. It's easier for a lens to lock on focus and things like that. But one thing I will say about the autofocus on this lens, I didn't notice any jumping around. Now, I own the kit lens as well, and the kit lens is superb for video. But when I was using the 16mm f1.4, I did notice sometimes it would lock onto a subject and then lock onto another one. Instead of smoothly transitioning to the other one, it'll do a bit of a jumping around. I don't know if my settings in my Fuji at the time were a bit, you know, out of whack, because it took me a while to get my custom settings set up, and I think they're perfect now. But on this particular lens, on this 16mm f2.8, it really did do a nice kind of a rack focus. Not so perfect, but it did nice smooth rack focus, and it reminded me when I was using my Sony camera a lot for video. It reminded me of that kind of smoothness. Not as smooth as my Canon kind of camera, but yeah, still silky smooth. I mean, for Fuji, I feel like it's one of the best lenses for video. That brings me on to my con, and this is probably the only con that I have for this lens, and it's the fact that it is so small. Like, being small is its quirk, its power, but when you come to use video, especially for me, I use a lot of manual video, so I'm trying to focus on the lens. I find that my finger, my thumb here, when I'm trying to focus, is just a little bit too thick. Obviously, it's my hands, and I end up touching the barrel and stuff like that, and I'm not really focusing. I'm just, yeah, it's a little bit too small for me. That's why I personally prefer the 60mm 1.4, because the focus barrel on that is super large, and you can get a good grip on it, which is what I prefer for video. But if you're into doing autofocus kind of things like that, then this lens is super dope. This brings me on to who this lens is kind of pushed towards, in my opinion anyway. I would say it's pushed towards a style of shooting that I was doing previously, say like last year when I was doing adventure photography out in, like, you know, the wilderness, up in the mountains. I feel like this lens will perform perfectly out in those scenarios. One, it's got the weather resistance. Two, it's 16mm. It's got that nice focal length, that 24mm full frame equivalent, which gives you a nice wide angle kind of view, not super wide and not, you know, not tight at all. So you kind of get that perfect balance between landscape photography and lifestyle photography. So as far as this lens goes, I would say this is more so a travel orientated lens. It being so small, it being compact, it being weather resistant, the way it looks on the camera is super nice. It fits into any bag you kind of put it in. So for travel, this lens is the #1. So I hope you guys enjoyed this short kind of macro review of this particular lens. The reason why it was so short is not Fujifilm's fault, it's my fault, because I had a lot going on this week, so I couldn't really do a full blooded review like I kind of normally do, where I go out and do some fantastic epic shots. But either way, I feel like I really enjoyed this lens, and I got a good feel for how it goes. So if there's any other lenses in the Fujifilm lineup, any other cameras that you'd like me to try and review on this channel, then please let me know in the comments below. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Fujifilm for allowing me, or giving me the opportunity to review some of their gear and show you guys on this channel. So let me know what you want in the comments, and I will catch you in whichever video happens to come next. Until next time, peace.